Imagine for a second that you are stepping up to the microphone.
Oh, setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah, you're in a dimly lit, packed jazz club. The bass player is laying down this heavy walking groove.
Right.
The drummer is locked in on the ride cymbal, and it is your turn to take a solo.
The pressure is on.
Exactly. And you want to play something gritty, something just drenched in soul.
The pressure on.
Right. But you've got this brand new, incredibly sophisticated piece of digital technology in your hands.
Okay.
So you close your eyes, you lean back, you go to execute this legendary, deeply expressive saxophone technique, and the instrument just looks at you and essentially says, no, thank you.
It just completely ignores you.
It gives you this perfectly sterile, flawlessly clean note instead. It absolutely refuses to play along with your human imperfection.
It is the ultimate frustration, honestly, for any musician, or really anyone trying to express themselves through a piece of modern technology.
Because it's too perfect, right?
Exactly. I mean, you have all the feeling in the world, the physical intention is there, but the digital default settings of the hardware are just acting as a roadblock to your creativity.
Yeah.
The computer brain inside the instrument simply doesn't understand the concept of a deliberate mistake.
And that tension between flawless technology and flawed humanity is exactly what we are digging into today on this deep dive.
That's a great topic.
We have a fascinating stack of source materials in front of us today. We're looking at a highly specific, very detailed technical guide accompanied by a rather striking cover image.
Which we will definitely get into.
Oh, for sure. It is all centered around one incredibly niche but revealing topic: how to program the Yamaha YDS-120 and the YDS-150 digital saxophones to play a legendary jazz articulation.
And our mission today is to explore how we can bridge that gap you just described in the jazz club.
Right.
We want to understand the mindset and really the mechanics required to bypass a digital instrument's factory-coded programming.
Getting under the hood.
Exactly. The goal is to recreate the deeply human, soulful, and sometimes intentional imperfections of acoustic jazz history, but on a machine designed for perfection.
It's a perfect case study in making technology serve the artist, rather than the other way around.
Right. The artist shouldn't have to conform to the technology.
So to really understand what we are trying to program into this digital saxophone, we have to look back at the history of the acoustic instrument.
We have to talk about Cannonball.
We have to talk about Julian "Cannonball" Adderley. For anyone who might not be familiar, Cannonball Adderley was an absolute titan of the alto saxophone.
The legend.
If you listen to a classic live recording, like Mercy, 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 you hear a sound that isn't just notes on a page. It is a physical, vocal, preaching style of playing.
It speaks to you.
Yeah, and the technique we are focusing on today is actually named after him. It's called the Cannonball Trill, which was his absolute signature move.
What's fascinating here is the physical reality of how this technique actually operates in the acoustic world, on a traditional brass horn.
Break that down for us.
Well, if you think about a standard classical trill, it's usually very clean.
Very proper.
Right. A musician is alternating rapidly between two adjacent notes in a scale, just lifting and pressing one finger.
Right, up and down.
The result sounds very polite, very precise, very aerodynamic, but the Cannonball Trill is an entirely different beast.
It is not polite.
Not at all. It relies on a concept called alternate fingerings, which musicians sometimes actually refer to as false fingerings.
See, that phrase alone, false fingerings, it makes it sound like you are actively breaking the rules of the instrument right out of the gate.
You essentially are. To understand why it sounds the way it does, we have to look at a tiny bit of acoustic physics.
Okay, lay it on us.
Normally, when you press keys on a saxophone, you are opening and closing holes in sequence to cleanly shorten or lengthen the column of air inside the horn.
Making the tube longer or shorter.
Right, and the air escapes out the first available open hole. But with a false fingering, you're doing something completely unorthodox.
Like what?
You might open a hole up high, but then close a series of keys further down the tube. You are forcing the sound waves to bounce around the inside of that metal cone in a really conflicted, turbulent way.
So you are intentionally confusing the air column.
Exactly.
Instead of letting the air flow out smoothly, you are creating a sort of acoustic traffic jam inside the horn.
That is a great way to visualize it. And that acoustic traffic jam is what creates the sound. The result of that turbulence is a rapid, slightly gritty, almost choked alternation between notes.
It's thick.
Very thick. It has a distinctively rough, percussive timbral effect that you simply cannot achieve by playing the instrument the correct way.
which totally explains why Cannonball favored it so heavily. He wasn't sitting in a symphony orchestra trying to blend in with the violins.
No, he was playing hard bop.
Hard bop and soul jazz.
Mm-hmm.
He used this specific turbulent articulation to inject intense emotion directly into his solos.
It gave his playing an incredibly bluesy flavor.
Yeah, when you hear a Cannonball Trill on an old vinyl record, you feel the friction. It's the raw emotion of the human breath struggling against the mechanics of the brass.
And that brings us directly to the digital dilemma we are exploring today.
The modern problem.
Right. The Yamaha YDS-120 and the YDS-150, they are marvels of modern engineering. They use advanced breath sensors and high-fidelity digital modeling to recreate the saxophone experience.
They're impressive pieces of tech.
They are, but because they are digital, they are fundamentally programmed for accuracy.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If I am going to spend potentially $1,000 on a state-of-the-art piece of hardware with pristine digital sampling, shouldn't I want those perfect, flawlessly tuned notes?
You'd think so, right?
Why go through the trouble of trying to make a premium digital instrument sound like it's sputtering or broken?
Because music, particularly jazz, is not about sterile perfection. The beauty is in the human element, the slight deviations, the grit.
The imperfection.
Exactly. By default, these Yamaha instruments are not set up to comprehend that kind of physically complicated, turbulent articulation.
So what happens if you try?
If you try to execute a false fingering on a factory reset Yamaha YDS, the computer brain inside it looks at the combination of buttons you are pressing, gets utterly confused, and usually just defaults to playing a clean single note.
It just finds it out.
It tries to fix your mistake.
It's basically autocorrect for jazz.
Autocorrect for jazz, yes.
You're trying to type in some expressive slang, and the saxophone keeps changing it to a formal, grammatically correct word that just ruins the punchline.
That is exactly what it's doing.
To bypass this jazz autocorrect, we have to look at a very specific clue provided in our source materials.
The cover image.
Yes, there is an image attached to this technical guide, and the visual contrast in this photo represents the exact audio contrast we've been talking about.
The staging of that photograph is highly deliberate.
Totally. On the right side of the frame, you have this beautiful, traditional acoustic saxophone. It's gleaming brass, covered in complex metal keywork, a true mechanical marvel from the 19th century.
Very classic.
And then, propped up right next to it on the left, is the Yamaha YDS. It is a sleek, matte black instrument. It looks like a prop from a science fiction film.
It really does.
It has soft buttons instead of leather pads.
Yeah.
You are looking at the analog world of breath and brass, sitting shoulder to shoulder with the digital world of sensors and code.
But the most revealing part of that image isn't the instruments themselves.
No.
It is the text overlay the creator chose to include.
Oh, yes. The creator leaves a breadcrumb trail right on the cover. The text specifically credits the software used to produce the image and the accompanying guide.
Which is such a weird detail to include.
It lists NotebookLM, Shotcut, GIMP, and the PopOS GNU Linux operating system. At first glance, reading through the sources, that felt like an incredibly random detail.
It really did.
Why would a tutorial about playing jazz on a digital saxophone pause to tell us about the image editing software and the computer operating system used to type up the document?
It seems like a complete tangent, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is actually the key to understanding the entire philosophy of this guide.
Okay, how so?
The author is telling you, the listener, exactly what kind of mindset is required to solve the digital dilemma we just discussed. NotebookLM, Shotcut, GIMP, PopOS. These are not your standard off-the-shelf corporate product.
Which are the big brand names.
Right. These belong to a specific, creator-focused, entirely open-source tech stack. PopOS GNU Linux, in particular, is an operating system favored by developers, makers, and people who demand total control over their hardware.
So to bring that 1950s acoustic soul into a 2020s digital instrument requires a very specific mentality.
The hacker mentality.
The creator is signaling that they approach technology from a maker's perspective. They don't just want to accept the shiny, closed-off software that comes pre-installed on a laptop. And similarly, they refuse to accept the factory default settings that Yamaha programmed into the saxophone.
That open-source tinkerer mindset is the true underlying lesson here. The real hack isn't just about mapping some MIDI notes.
It's bigger than that.
It is the realization that these digital instruments are essentially blank slates.
Right.
You have to go beneath the surface. You have to bend the technology to serve your artistic vision, rather than letting the engineers who built the device dictate how you sound.
The tools used to write the guide perfectly mirror the rebellious technique taught inside the guide.
Beautifully said.
Okay, let's unpack this. We understand the history. We understand the maker mindset. How do we physically execute this?
Time to get into the weeds.
If we want to teach this perfectly coated piece of plastic and silicon how to play the blues, what are the practical steps?
The first step is establishing a line of communication. You have to get the instrument talking to its control center.
Which is what?
In this case, it is a dedicated mobile app called the YDS Controller. This app is the brains of the operation. It is where all the deep parameter tweaking and custom mapping takes place.
So we have to somehow wire this physical horn into a smartphone or a tablet to access its brain.
Exactly.
And the guide points out that how you make that connection depends entirely on which model of the Yamaha you own.
Right. There are distinct hardware differences here. The YDS-150 comes with a premium feature built-in Bluetooth connectivity.
Very nice.
If you have that model, you can pair the instrument to the YDS Controller app completely wirelessly, which is incredibly convenient.
But if you are working with the YDS-120, which is the more streamlined model, you don't have Bluetooth.
You do not. In that scenario, or even if you have the YDS-150 but simply prefer a stable hardwired connection, you need a specific piece of hardware called an OTG cable.
OTG.
OTG stands for on the go. Normally, a smartphone acts as a passive device when you plug it into a computer. An OTG cable flips that dynamic.
It puts the phone in charge.
Exactly. It allows your mobile device to act as the host, meaning it can actively command and talk directly to external hardware, like our digital saxophone, via a wired USB connection.
Okay, so once that cable is plugged in or the Bluetooth is paired, you are inside the system.
You're in the matrix.
You have access to the fingering settings. Now, we have to translate the acoustic physics we talked about earlier into a digital language the app can understand.
Right.
To start, where does a Cannonball Trill typically happen on an acoustic saxophone?
The playable range for the specific false fingering technique can vary slightly depending on the make and model of the acoustic horn, but it generally lives in a very specific sweet spot. The guide focuses on the range from the note A4 through the note D5.
To make this visual for a second, let's simplify the physical layout of the instrument.
Good idea.
Normally, to play higher notes on a saxophone, you use what is called an octave key, which sits on the back of the horn. Think of it exactly like the shift key on your computer keyboard.
That's a perfect analogy.
You keep your hands in the same position, hold down the shift key, and you get a capitalized higher version of the note. But for the acoustic Cannonball Trill in this lower range, you are keeping your hands in a lower position and completely ignoring that shift key.
Spot on. For example, to play the anchor note A4, you only have the top two fingers of your left hand pressed down, and your thumb is actively staying away from that octave key.
Okay, got it.
And at the very top of that playable range is D5. To play that specific D5, you use the D palm key, a side key operated by the palm of your left hand, and again, no octave key applied.
So if we're mapping this inside the YDS Controller app, I'm assuming we have to tell the digital brain two things. Where our hands currently are on those physical keys,
Yes.
and what note we wanted to artificially jump to when we trigger the trill. We aren't teaching it aerodynamic physics. We are creating a custom interval map.
You have deduced the core logic of the hack. Because the Yamaha has no physical air column to disrupt, we have to program a macro. In the app, you assign a specific button on the instrument. The guide recommends the top trill key to act as your trigger.
Okay.
You are telling the software, when my hands are holding this specific bass note and I press this trigger key, I want you to instantly jump to this specific higher target note.
Instead of reading through an audio spreadsheet of every single note combination in the guide, let's look at the pattern it creates.
Let's do it.
You are essentially telling the app that whenever you are in one of those specific lower hand positions, say holding that A4 and you flare that side trigger button, you want the computer to instantly jump up a minor third to a C5.
Right.
And you do this all the way up the scale. BB4 jumps up to a DB5.
Yep.
B4 goes to a D5.
You are meticulously rebuilding an acoustic quirk using ones and zeros. You program that interval jump for every note from A4 up to that palm key D5.
C5 up to EB5, C#5 to E5.
Exactly. You hold the bass note, you flutter the trigger, and the computer executes the rapid jumping for you, simulating the gritty, turbulent acoustic alternation we described earlier.
It is brilliant because it is so incredibly literal. You are brute forcing the computer to behave like a struggling physical mechanism.
It works perfectly.
And once you have mapped that lower octave, the guide points out that you are only halfway there. The Cannonball Trill isn't restricted to just that lower register. It happens higher up on the horn as well.
We have to tackle the upper octave counterparts, which spans from A5 through D6.
Okay, how does that work?
The beautiful thing about the physical mechanics of the saxophone and how it translates to this digital mapping is the symmetry. The bass fingerings for this upper octave are fundamentally identical to the lower octave, with one single crucial addition.
You just hold down the shift key.
Precisely. You add the octave key with your left thumb. So for the acoustic fingering of an A5, you have those same top two left-hand fingers pressed down, but now the octave key is engaged.
Makes sense.
For the D6, you use that same left palm key, again with the octave key added.
The logic holds perfectly. You go back into the YDS Controller app and program the exact same macro for the upper register. A5 jumps to C6.
Right. DB5 jumps to DB6. You map the intervals all the way up. B5 to D6, C6 to Eb6, C#6 to E6.
And finally, that D6.
Right, the D6 with the octave applied, which you program to jump up to an E6, you hit save, and suddenly your sterile, space-age digital wind synthesizer is capable of barking out a gritty 1950s hard bop articulation. It's quite the transformation. But this raises an important question, though. I'm sure we have listeners tuning in right now who have never picked up a saxophone, digital or acoustic, and likely never will.
Sure, yeah.
Why does diving into the minutia of interval mapping and false fingerings matter to them?
That is a great point. So, what is the takeaway for the non-musician? Why should they care about wiring a digital horn to an app just to program a BB5 to jump to a DB6?
It matters because this highly specific technical guide is actually a profound commentary on how we interact with the technology that permeates our daily lives.
The bigger picture.
Yes. We exist in an increasingly automated, heavily auto-corrected world. Our devices are constantly working in the background to smooth out our rough edges.
That's very true.
Your smartphone automatically brightens the shadows in your photographs to make them pristine. Your messaging apps fix your typos and grammar before you even hit send.
Yep.
And by default, a digital instrument will perfectly tune, quantize, and clean up every single note a musician plays.
The default state of modern technology is to make us all look and sound like flawless, optimized versions of ourselves. It removes the friction.
But as we discussed with Cannonball Adderley, art and human expression rely on that friction. Emotion lives in the struggle.
Absolutely.
Going through the tedious process of connecting an OTG cable, opening an app, and manually saving these interval settings proves that our digital tools don't have to be sterile. They don't just have to mimic clean, perfect sounds.
We can fight back against the autocorrect.
With a little bit of that open source maker mentality, the willingness to look past the shiny exterior and tinker with the parameters, we can force our technology to accommodate our humanity. We can take a blank digital slate and teach it how to replicate the unpredictable, soulful history of human expression.
I love that.
We can code the ghost back into the machine.
Coding the ghost back into the machine. That perfectly captures the essence of what this creator accomplished. Let's summarize the incredibly unique journey we have taken today.
It's been a ride.
We started by exploring the bluesy, emotional history of jazz legend Julian "Cannonball" Adderley and his signature trill, a gritty, turbulent sound born entirely out of confusing the acoustic physics of a brass tube.
Right.
We then looked at a striking visual metaphor of a matte black digital sax sitting next to a brass acoustic one, and realized that using open source tools like PopOS isn't just a tech preference. It is the exact rebellious mindset needed to hack modern music tech.
And we broke down the practical application of that mindset.
Yeah.
By using a simple OTG cable or a Bluetooth connection to access the YDS Controller app, a musician can bypass the factory settings of a Yamaha digital saxophone.
Yeah.
By creating a custom interval map across 2 octaves, programming a bass note and a trigger key to artificially force an imperfect jumpa, they bring the analog soul of the 1950s straight into the digital realm.
It is a remarkable intersection of jazz history and modern software manipulation.
It is, and it leaves us with the final thought. I want you, the listener, to mull over as you go about your day.
Leave them with something to think about.
We just spent this entire deep dive unpacking how a musician can force a flawlessly engineered digital instrument to mimic the physical struggles and acoustic quirks of a traditional saxophone.
Right.
As our digital devices, our creative software, and our artificial intelligence tools become increasingly flawless and capable of perfect synthesis, will the ultimate luxury feature in the future actually be the ability to program in intentional human imperfections?
That is a fascinating concept to chew on. In a world where everything can be perfect, maybe the ultimate luxury is the freedom to be flawed.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Whether you were trying to program a digital synthesizer, customizing your computer's operating system, or just trying to navigate a world full of aggressive autocorrects, we encourage you to stay curious.
Keep tinkering.
Keep searching for that human element, and always look beneath the default settings of the world around you.